First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I would like to say that I'm very accustomed to being the only woman on the panel, so I'm glad to be representing my gender here today. So this panel is on the rise of populism, why is this happening, and what does this mean? The causes and the consequences. I only have 7 minutes. Initially, I was going to show you some data, but then I decided against it. But what I will talk to you about today is evidence-based research that I've been carrying out for a long time. So if you are interested, please let me know. What I will do today is make 3 key points that relate quite a lot to what has been said, and then we can pick up on these in the discussion. But before I do, I want to make a disclaimer, something that no one else has said, and that is I am very skeptical of the term populism. I find it very difficult to understand really what populism is. I feel we use it as a catch-all term to denote parties that perhaps emphasize the national preference or perhaps emphasize nationalism. It is left-wing, it is right-wing, it is also mainstream, it is popular, it is elite-based. I mean, it can be parties, it can be groups, it can be anything. This makes it lose its analytical power because nothing is not populism, if you like. In any discussion, really who we don't like, we call a populist. So for the preference, for my preference, I prefer to call these parties far right and far left, or even nationalist, because that allows us to nuance different patterns, the rise of the far right in certain countries versus the rise of the far left versus the rise of both. So this is what I will be talking about today, the rise of the far right and the far left in Europe, and I'm happy to have a discussion on that. So point number 1, my first point is a political point. We heard this a lot today. When I tell people that I work on the far right, people say, oh, are you surprised? Economic crisis, the winners and versus the losers of globalization. Obviously, we have the rise of populism or far right. I disagree. I think it's not about the economic crisis per se or the losers of globalization per se, but it's actually the particular policies that we adopt, because at the end of the day, policies mediate the effect of insecurity. Policies mediate the effect of these economic malaise, right, on the citizens. And this has a political dimension and it has an economic dimension. First, about the political dimension, how do we know this? I am a comparativist by training. And I know this by looking at other countries that have experienced economic crisis in Europe, but don't really have the rise of the far right, and only few have the rise of the far left. So if it is indeed economic crisis that is leading to the rise of the far right, why has Portugal not responded in this way? Why has Spain not responded in this way? Why has the Republic of Ireland not responded in this way? Even in Cyprus, which is a very similar country to Greece, the sister party to the Golden Dawn, in fact, is not very successful. We did a bit of research on this, and we found very aptly, this is the title of this panel, we found that what differs between Greece and Portugal and Spain is in fact good governance indicators, is in fact the belief the citizens have in state capacity, in the capacity of the state to deliver to its social contract obligations. Corruption was one of them. Greece is, in the perceptions of citizens, seems to be far more corrupt than Portugal or Spain or Ireland. Trust in institutions, trust in governance in general. So this is my first point, the political point. So I just told you economic then crisis doesn't matter. Does that mean the economy doesn't matter? Absolutely not. The economy does matter, but again, it matters in terms of policies. And how do we know this? We know because, again, if economic crisis creates economic insecurity, then it is political institutions and economic institutions that mediate this insecurity. So, turn to data again. If we look at levels of unemployment in Europe, they don't correlate with the rise of far-right parties at all. We know that the Netherlands has fairly low levels of unemployment, but Wilders might win the next election. We know that Spain has the second highest levels of unemployment and youth unemployment in Europe after Greece, and yet it has no far right. But what we also know through the research is that when you look at the mediating role of labor market institutions, so when you look at welfare state, when you look at, for example, employment protection legislation and benefits, when you look at wage stagnation, these do matter for the rise of the far right. So it's not about economic crisis per se, but rather it is about the extent to which labor market policies can mediate the effect of economic insecurity, not to the labor market outsiders, not only on the unemployed, but rather the labor market insiders, the middle classes, who are the ones that suffer most from austerity. Finally, my final point, my third point, is on the consequences of this phenomenon. I heard the previous panel, people say, well, Marine Le Pen might not win. Is it really a problem? It's a problem even though Marine Le Pen might not win, even though Geert Wilders might not win. It's a problem not because these populist, if you like, or far-right people might get some votes, but it's a problem because what they have done is that they have permitted the mainstream. They are using a form of civic nationalism, you spoke about nationalism, that no longer says we exclude people because of their race or we exclude people because of their color. But they use a narrative that says we exclude those who are intolerant of our liberal democratic ideas. And in doing that, they have become more able to blur the line between what is extreme and what is mainstream. So very quickly to conclude, I made 3 points, a political point, an economic point, and a consequence point, to show you that it's not really about the structural issues alone. It is not really only about the triggers, but it is about the policies we adopt. I think the biggest problem is how we respond as a mainstream. What I am saying that I find quite dangerous is that mainstream parties, instead of distancing themselves from this rhetoric, they move closer to these far-right parties. They adopt some of the policies in order to compete in their arena. And I think that this is the biggest negative consequence of populism. Thank you.